Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused the West of starting the war in Ukraine, but he says he's not going to start a nuclear war. At the end of his 2-hour speech, Putin said Russia was suspending but not exiting the nuclear arms reduction START treaty with the US. Peter Jennings, Defence and Security Analyst, joins me now from Canberra. Peter, so great to have you with me. Look, this speech was fascinating, and it seems very clear that, despite how unsuccessful he's been over the past year, we're now coming up 1 year since Russia invaded Ukraine, Putin's not backing down anytime soon. Do you think this is for his own domestic reasons? Do you think this is because of his own ego?
It's a combination of both. It's very hard to separate the ego from his absolute rule of the country now. I thought the speech was interesting, Sharri, because it wasn't as ranting as some of the ones he's given about the invasion and about the war. There was no real threat of use of nuclear weapons. It was really a message to Russian citizens to say, we are under attack. We, Russia, are under attack more widely from the West. And we have to knuckle down and accept that this is going to take a long time to deal with. And I think that's his domestic concern, is that there doesn't appear to be a lot of support for the war inside Russia. There's kind of passive support because that's what the regime wants. But the first time Putin called for conscription, people were flooding the borders to leave. Yeah. So I think his real challenge is how does he sustain domestic support for what is increasingly an unpopular conflict.
The NATO boss has said that we should prepare for more war from Russia. Do you think this is just going to be in Ukraine, or Putin's going to set his sights elsewhere?
Look, there's a risk of it, but the truth of the matter is after 12 months, the war is still being localised in Ukraine, and Russia has really done nothing to suggest that it's interested to pick a fight with NATO. Yeah. So I think inside Ukraine it will be for the foreseeable future. But, there's always a risk. A missile just lands in the wrong place or something happens, and then the conflict has a potential to spread.
And just before we move off Russia, because there's so much to talk to you about, are you worried about Russia exiting the nuclear treaty?
Look, I think it was inevitable that this was going to happen because one of the things Putin has been doing is investing money into a whole range of exotic new weapons technology, including unmanned nuclear submarines that are supposed to sort of explode off the American East Coast and swamp cities. So Putin doesn't want to be constrained by arms control agreements. And I think his speech is really just a vehicle to say that's something we're moving from now, and to blame the West and to continue to do what he wants to do.
Yeah. Last night, Australia's top spy, the boss of ASIO, Mike Burgess, I was very critical of him on the show last night, and we'll get to that in a minute, Peter, but he said that he was pressured by senior officials to ease up on ASIO's interference operations, and this is despite evidence that we've been targeted in record numbers by foreign spies and agents. This is quite a major revelation from the boss of ASIO, that he has personally been pressured by senior bureaucrats to back down on his foreign interference operations.
It's very concerning, and I'm here to tell you, Sharri, that if that pressure was put onto Mike Burgess, it's not because we're being spied on by Canada or Cuba or Costa Rica. There is only one country which is causing this level of concern, and it's China. And still inside Canberra, there is this constituency which says, look the other way because we're making so much money from China that, let's not bother about espionage. I fully support Mike Burgess in him saying that he's not going to put up with that. ASIO has an important remit to prevent hostile intelligence activities happening in Australia. And if that means that we've got to push hard against Chinese espionage, then so be it. There are more important things at stake here than simply selling commodities to
interests,
China.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Look, on my show last night, I was very critical of the security agencies, not just ASIO, but also ASD, the Signals Directorate, for failing to warn other government departments about the risk of having the Chinese security cameras in their buildings. We found out that 88 politicians have them installed, and they're currently being ripped out. What do you think? How could the spy agencies have such a sophisticated understanding of this and yet fail to warn anyone else?
I'm really at a loss, and I reflect on this, Sharri, that a couple of years ago when I was running ASPI, the Strategic Policy Institute, in November of 2019, I requested our building owners to take down Chinese-sourced surveillance cameras. It was that obvious that you didn't need to be running an intelligence agency to understand this was a threat. And frankly, I think across the public service, we have not had our act together to really deal comprehensively with this wide-ranging espionage threat, not exclusively, but primarily from China. And so 3 years later, to be now told that there are hundreds of sites where these cameras have to be taken down, that's just not good enough. The public service needs to think harder about how it protects itself. And, you know, frankly, it won't just be security cameras. There will be other instances where there should be concerns as well. And, you know, these have to be dealt with up front, and that starts with an honest conversation about where is the threat coming from. And once we have that conversation, we can know better how to deal with it.
Yeah. I just want to play you what Mike Burgess had to say in Senate estimates about why the security agencies hadn't warned anyone. Have a look at this.
I understand where you're going with your concern, and I would share with you the concern of nothing wrong with the technology. It's where the data that it collects and where it would end up and what else it could be used for would be of great concern to me and my agency.
It's extraordinary. Now, the PM next week, Peter, is holding a cybersecurity roundtable. It seems Australia is so far behind on cybersecurity. I mean, ASIO are not even realising that cybersecurity is at the heart of foreign espionage.
It's at the heart of it, along with human security, and often the two things enable each other. But yes, I think Australians are fooling themselves if they think that we are not a high priority Chinese target. And that's not just into defence and national security. It's across any industry. It's into our universities. It's at all levels of government. That's just how China does spying. It's collect the data as much as you can and then look afterwards to see if it may be useful or can be sewn together in some way. So we've got to get smarter and more savvy about this, and not just think that everything's fine and somehow Australia's not being targeted.
Yeah. Peter Jennings, thank you for joining me.